In Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, James Luceno details all the physical limitations that Vader is dealing with in getting accustomed to his prosthetics and his suit. Luceno got the idea for this aspect of the novel after talking with Ryan Kaufman, a former employee with LucasArts. Kaufman had worn a Darth Vader costume several times while working on different video games, and his experience wearing the suit gave Luceno the idea to dedicate part of the novel to just Vader's struggles with the physical reality he now finds himself in. Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader ultimately made it to number 11 on the New York Times bestseller list for 2 straight weeks, from the week of December 11th to the week of December 18th, 2005. I definitely read Labyrinth of Evil and Revenge of the Sith when they came out, but I never concluded the Dark Lord trilogy by reading Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader at all, I assume, because in rereading it this time around, everything was completely new to me. So, a brief summary. On the Outer Rim world of Organa, Jedi Master Roan Shryne and Padawan Olee Starstone are leading an attack on a separatist stronghold when the tide suddenly turns against them. Though they narrowly avoid execution, their biggest threat comes not from the clone troopers, nor from the newly deployed stormtroopers, but from the lethal crimson blade of the newly remade Darth Vader. So even though they were not intended to be a trilogy, Labyrinth of Evil by James Luceno, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover, and Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader by James Luceno again, have been released as the quote-unquote Dark Lord trilogy, in that they sort of show Anakin's fall and Vader's rise, and they were packaged together as an omnibus that had Vader on the cover. But I do have to say that for a novel called Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, I felt like Vader made up about a third of the story, and 2/3 of the story was everything going on with Roan Shryne and Olee Starstone and the other fugitive Jedi they meet along their journey. At first I went, well, that's just misdirection and tricksy marketing, because people coming to the story wanting it to be 100% Darth Vader are going to find that that is not the case. Obviously, Darth Vader is popular. Darth Vader's on the cover. Darth Vader is a huge character and a huge part of the draw to Star Wars. But reading online, I found that Luceno didn't name the novel that himself. He turned it in unnamed, and it was tricksy marketing who applied the Darth Vader label, so I'm not blaming Luceno here. I'm blaming Del Rey and Lucasfilm, who obviously knew that Vader was going to be more of a draw than if they had named this novel, like, The Aftermath of Order 66, which is really closer to the truth here. So Dark Lord is broken up into 5 parts. The first part is all about the battle on Organa in the last hours of the Clone War, Shryne and Starstone's master Bol Shatak evading execution, mainly because some of the clone commandos that they were with questioned the order that they were given. This is definitely an aspect of the Clone Wars that would change over the intervening years, because here it very much appears that Order 66 was just an order that Palpatine gave, like these contingency orders. And for Ion Team, these commandos, they're not directly given Order 66. They're just told by Commander Salvo, we need to take out the Jedi, and they question it. But of course, in later Clone Wars materials, like the 3D animated show, Order 66 became something that was hardwired into them, so that it's almost as though the clones are activated. So the Jedi escape, they are captured, but they're believed to be mercenaries with the rest of the mercenaries on Organa. They're held captive for 4 weeks, and then Vader appears. Vader has been sent by the Emperor to take care of the clone commandos who disobeyed orders. And the Jedi have no idea who this guy is. He may be a Sith because he's got a red lightsaber, but they're not sure. He says he's not a Jedi. He seems to be some sort of cyborg or machine like General Grievous was. And so a lot of the novel is not just the Jedi on the run evading capture and trying to find other fugitive Jedi, but just figure out who the heck this Darth Vader is and how he fits into the equation here. It all culminates in a big battle on Kashyyyk as the Empire is trying to enslave the Wookiees, and Vader has tracked down the remaining Jedi. He has a fight with Shryne. Shryne does not make it, but he has some revelations before he goes. And actually, the very last chapter of the epilogue is Obi-Wan Kenobi on Anchorhead, hearing the news that Vader is still alive, but being told by the spirit of his master Qui-Gon Jinn that he will never come to Tatooine and would never return to somewhere that Anakin Skywalker had been, because Anakin Skywalker to Vader is dead. So let's talk about Vader here. I found his parts of the novel very interesting, perhaps more interesting than what was going on with the fugitive Jedi. I think that what Luceno does with his character is well done. We still see a fair amount of Anakin Skywalker in him, despite the fact that Vader probably wouldn't admit that. The physical limitations of his suit and his prosthetics mean that he has to completely change the way he fights, the way he moves, and he is honestly pretty whiny about it. As we saw in Revenge of the Sith, he's willing to ally himself with Palpatine, but at the same time, he also sees himself overthrowing him. I guess this is what always happens to Sith masters and apprentice, that because of the state of power, the pull of power, the lesser one is always trying to take over from the greater. And so with Vader, we see how if only Padme hadn't turned against him, he would be sitting on the Imperial throne with his wife and child at his side. And as the novel ends, he needs the Sith knowledge and information that his master can relate to him, but he still plans to, at some point in the future, scheme against him, just as Palpatine plans at some point in the future, if he finds a better, stronger prospect, he's going to take them as apprentice and chuck Vader to the wayside. And I found the way that Vader has to change how he fights and how he moves really interesting, because he's taller, he's much stronger now, but he doesn't have the flexibility that Anakin had. There's one part where he talks about he can't raise his arms up as high as he could now in the suit with the prosthetics. So his fighting style has changed, and it's more essentially what we saw in the original trilogy, that instead of like the flips and the swinging all around and stuff, because of Vader's physical limitations, his fighting style will have to change. And that's something that he works through here, that when he initially faces off against Bol Shatak, he's clumsy. But by the time he fights Roan Shryne on Kashyyyk, he has come to a better understanding of what he can and can't do, and he's a much more formidable opponent as a result. With the fugitive Jedi, who take up so much of the plot line here, I didn't dislike any of them, but I guess it was that feeling where you read about them and you say, I've never heard of these before, especially in the case of when they pick up 6 more Jedi at a rendezvous point. You've never heard of any of them. And this is, just weeks after Order 66, so maybe don't get too attached, because most of them probably won't survive. Olee Starstone, the Padawan, is the eager one. She's the idealistic one. She had been a librarian in training at the Jedi Temple, learning under Jocasta Nu, but once the Clone Wars broke out, she ended up becoming Padawan to bullshit talk and trying to learn about a different side of the Force. But that's still what she's most drawn to. Information and helping people and knowledge. And she's the one that believes that, you know, they need to find all the survivors and bring them together, then they can overthrow the Emperor. While Roan Shryne is the one that's more pessimistic, but perhaps more realistic, who realizes that if Palpatine could take out 4 Jedi Masters, including Master Windu, at once, that if Master Kenobi and Master Yoda are in hiding, like, they will not be able to achieve anything that the great masters could not, and they should follow the orders they were given and go into hiding. And I think, too, with Shryne, as the war has progressed, he has felt like his Force abilities are decreasing and lessening, and it's harder for him to understand the pull of the Force and if he's where he's supposed to be. And I think, too, meeting his biological mother, knowing that she did not want to give him up while his father did, feels that joining in with the smugglers is just maybe what he's meant to do if he doesn't even feel like he has this strong Force potential after all he's gone through with the war. Of course, when push comes to shove, Shryne rises to the challenge. The other Jedi are able to get away while he stays behind to fight Vader. And it's while fighting Vader that he has 2 realizations. First, that right before the Battle of Organa, he basically foresaw his own death, although he didn't know it was his death at the time. And he also sees that even though the Sith have triumphed and the Jedi Order is in ruins, that the Force will still persevere in the end. It's not a question of how, it's just a question of when. That even though Palpatine promised this empire would stand for thousands of years, that's not going to happen. And though the Jedi may have been deeply, deeply played by Palpatine, that the light will still triumph in the end. And honestly, I'm really surprised that in the end we had 5 Jedi get away unscathed. We don't hear anything of them further, so maybe they later got caught and rooted out by Vader and the Inquisitors and things like that, but I guess I was expecting like a Rogue One situation here where everyone dies in the end, but Luceno's a little more optimistic than that. And then I didn't want to forget about him, but we also have some scenes with Bail Organa, while Mon Mothma and some of the other senators are pushing to rebel against Palpatine immediately, that this is the time while things are in flux to overthrow his authority. Bail Organa, because he has Leia to protect, is much more hesitant to move immediately. And he is also one of the very few people who knew that Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. And being a senator on Coruscant, he sees Vader in the black suit, and he knows what that means, and he knows what danger that is to his infant daughter. So he walks a very fine line of pushing against the Emperor's authority without outright doing so, and wanting to help the cause, but knowing that they need to wait, and that this is not the time. If anything, I wish we had seen more of Queen Breha of Alderaan, because all we really see of her briefly is that she's there with Leia, but most of the stuff is Bail, and I felt like this was maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity, like, to see what she's like as well, get into her head, but it's just Bail all the time. So on the issues front, it just ties back into that false advertising where, for a novel called Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, I thought that what we got of Vader was really, really great, but I was expecting more Vader, and so to have so much of the story, like double the Vader plotline, to involve these fugitive original Jedi characters was surprising to me. And I think this was one instance where it would have made more sense to me to call this novel something like Order 66. I know it's a Karen Travis novel, but they hadn't used that title yet, instead of The Rise of Darth Vader, because while a key part of the story is Vader laying Anakin Skywalker to rest and coming to terms with his current reality, it's not the majority of the story. And I could see that being frustrating to some readers, that when you've got a book with Vader on the cover and Vader's name in the title, you expect it to be all Vader all the time. and this novel is not. And I do feel like maybe there were too many Jedi here, because of the Jedi, the only ones that really get fleshed out in any detail are Shryne and Olee Starstone, which we spend most of the time with them, but then we pick up 6 more Jedi, and there's a human Jedi Knight and a Hodin Jedi Knight and 2 Padawans and the 2 agricultural corps members. But we just don't know them in the same way that we know Shryne and Olee Starstone. And while I did just say that leaving 4 of them alive at the end is like way more optimistic than I expected, I also don't know how realistic it is. And I really think it maybe would have made more sense if, besides Vader killing the 2 Jedi Knights and then Shryne, and like the agricultural corps members and one of the Padawans are grievously wounded, but they're okay, that like those 3 died, and then the only ones we have left alive is the blind Padawan and Olee Starstone, then we would still have had 2 Padawans alive out there to keep the Force going during the dark time. So I don't know. It is a very optimistic ending, but at the same time, I'm not sure how realistic it is for the reality of that post Revenge of the Sith, pre A New Hope time in the Star Wars galaxy. And finally, Chewbacca's here. I'm not sure how much of this I could lay on James Luceno. Most of it, I think, is George Lucas himself, who included Chewbacca in Revenge of the Sith. This has always felt like not a plot hole to me, but a strange thing, because you really would have thought that if Chewbacca knew Master Yoda, had interacted with Jedi personally, that this would have come up some point in the intervening years. But of course the answer is that all those books written post Return of the Jedi came out before Revenge of the Sith, so no one knew that Chewbacca had had these Jedi interactions. Since Chewbacca was there and put Yoda in the capsule and saw him off, I guess it makes sense for them to talk to Chewbacca here on Kashyyyk, because they're asking about Jedi, and Chewbacca was there and saw, little tiny green Jedi go away. But it just felt like too much Chewbacca, because we have Chewbacca piloting the ship for them, and then he goes off with the smugglers in the end because he can't check on his family, and we know that at some point Chewbacca's going to end up enslaved by the Empire and Han will save him. But I just felt like this was too much Chewbacca, and again raised questions about why he had not talked about this aspect of his past before. So, in short, I really liked what Luceno did here with Vader, almost bridging the gap between the Anakin of the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith and the Vader we see in the original trilogy, that he's coming to terms with the trauma that has happened to him, a lot of it self-induced, and making his mind up to bury his past and to look towards his future, and this future involves at some point overthrowing his master and taking control. And while I didn't dislike any of these original Jedi characters, I did feel like there were maybe too many of them here. They had an interesting story, but I did feel at times as though their story was taking away from Vader's story, and every time we would cut to them, I just wanted to go back to Vader again and get into his head a little bit more. Still, if you're coming off of Revenge of the Sith and you're like, oh, but I want to see more with Vader, this is the book for you. Pick this up. It's the very beginning of the Empire and how the Imperial officers don't know what to make of Vader, but by the end, he is definitely someone to be followed and to be feared. So next time we are jumping a little bit back in time to the period between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones with Timothy Zahn's long-awaited Outbound flight.